Hawundwashmea Nikadeshmach. We again thank you for this another day, for us all to experience whatever it is that we have chosen to experience. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, hello on this Wednesday. Anybody else losing track of the days? I think it's April the 22nd today. I have come to read chapter 6 of Wake Up to the Alchemy of Your Heart to you. And I thank you for tuning in to allow me to read to you. It's really good to see each and every one of you. And the chapter today, chapter 6, is, I think it's going to be divided into 2 parts. And it's called Close Encounters with the Supernatural and Magical. And again, I just would like to express my gratitude to each of you in sharing in this incarnation with me, going through what we are going through right now. I mean, the stories that we're going to have to tell our children and grandchildren about how this revolution happened, and how each and every one of us are being used to raise the vibration, to let others know that they are loved unconditionally. And it's really an honor to be here with each and every one of you. So, without further ado, chapter 6, Close Encounters with the Supernatural and Magical. I will say right now, in the next paragraphs I share with you, I am going to tell you about my encounters with what can be called supernatural or unseen forces. Remember, I am only here to share with you the truth of my journey. I was raised a fundamental Baptist, and these moments and encounters have completely changed my belief system that I used to hold on to dearly. I have since learned that holding on to any belief only limits the possibilities that we can experience. It's like being stuck in a box, and only those things that can fit in the box will manifest. I will use the example of going to school. We learned how to read and write under the rules of the English language. Yet, as I said before, if I would have followed those rules, I would have never opened myself up to heart language. I had to get out of that box in order to receive that blessing. In the next chapter, I am going to share with you the story of my encounters. But first, I need to give you a little bit of backstory. So here it goes. I can almost remember like it was yesterday, the moment that evil first really appeared to me. Now, in my life work of soul counseling, I do quite a bit more than your average counselor. In soul counseling, I have the ability to not only see your early years, I also see, if necessary, your past lives as well. I also talk to people that most would call dead. The way I see it, though, is their souls have just merely separated from their bodies. I see and sense and hear ghosts and spirits that other people can't. I have a special connection to the energies around me. I see and sense the energy field of all things around us. There are terms in the metaphysical world for those things that I do. So before I go into my story, I would like to share with you these abilities and how I came to the knowledge that I have of them. And finally, how I use them. I have found that every single one of us already has the ability of these senses, and that we just have to open ourselves up and be open to using them. The opening. My opening happened on October 2011. As I told you earlier, I experienced heavy mercury poisoning and I was very sick. I had since taken up and started a practice of meditation and sun gazing. Most meditation practices seem to consist of a time where your body and mind are still and quiet. In this case, it is a time of going inside yourself and listening. There are those practices, however, where we meditate through movement, such as dance, Tai Chi, Qigong, and even laughter. It is considered a form of meditation pretty much when we raise our vibration from a lower frequency vibration to a higher frequency vibration. For example, moving from a state of fear and anger into a state of love and compassion. It must have been around 9 o'clock that cold night in October of 2011 when my life took the most interesting turn. I was really not feeling the bestest ever, and I decided to sit down on the floor and work on raising my vibration by meditating. My wife was home and thinking it was about bedtime, and my friend was over. While I was sitting on the floor, I heard a soft voice speak to me. It suggested that I go outside and look up. I stopped my meditation and slowly lifted myself off the floor. I told my wife and friend that I had heard a voice and it suggested that I go outside and look up. They both looked at me like I had two heads. But I knew in my heart that I needed to follow that still, soft, small voice. My dear wife helped me get all bundled up with my coat and gloves and wrapped me up in a blanket. After I was all warm and comfort cozy, I headed out the door into the night. I got to the edge of the sidewalk leading away from our townhome and looked up into the dark night sky. I didn't see anything. Then that same small voice said, "Go across the street." By that time, my friend had come outside to join me. So he and I walked across the street just behind the small strip mall. There happened to be an empty space where the cars normally parked. So I sat down at that spot on the curb and made myself comfortable. After several seconds, I looked up into the night sky. My dear friends, it was the first time I saw a light ship. Some call them UFOs and spaceships. I like to call them light ships. The light was glowing so brightly into the night. When I first looked at it, the color was orange. As I gazed at it, the light started changing colors and started moving around. It shined brightly from the beautiful orange color to blue, then to red, purple, pink, and green. The light colors were so brilliant, and oh my, it was actually moving. It was actually even changing shapes too. At one point, it even looked like a dragonfly. I kept asking my friend if he could see it too. I still don't know, even to this day, if he was being truthful that night when he kept telling me, yes, he could see it. All I knew is that I could see it, And what I was witnessing was nothing like I had ever seen before. I sat there staring up at the night sky. I was quite amazed when all of a sudden my mouth opened and I started singing these words. Love to all souls in the universe. Love to the peoples everywhere. Loving light into the darkness. Loving light into the darkness. Love. I kept singing these words over and over again. And as I sang them, the colors on the light ship would pulse brighter and brighter. It would circle around and do flip-flops all over the sky. It was as if it was dancing to my singing. It was lightly snowing when I first came outside over an hour ago, and now the snow began to fall heavier with giant snowflakes. I looked across the street and saw a guy walking very stiffly. He was wearing basketball shorts and a tank top. It was as if he looked like a zombie walking up the sidewalk. I yelled, "Hello to you. How are you tonight?" He had no response and kept on sleepwalking. A few minutes later, another guy was walking up the sidewalk toward us. He was smoking a cigarette and had a lively bounce to his step. I think he was even whistling a happy tune. I yelled a cheerful, "Good evening. Would you do me a favor and look up?" He stopped and looked up and literally froze in his tracks as he excitedly proclaimed, "Oh my God, it's moving!" I confirmed to him that I saw it too, and that I had been out here quite a while with my friend. He graciously thanked me for bringing his awareness to it by asking him to look up. I guess it was beginning to get much later because soon thereafter my dear wife came out to where my friend and I were sitting. The giant snowflakes were still falling, but had seemed to lighten up a bit. They were so beautiful. I could tell by the way she was walking that she wasn't very happy that I was sick and still chose to be outside in the middle of the snow falling on that cold night. I told her to look up. It's funny because when she did, she didn't see anything. She was, however, in a very disgruntled state of mind, and me choosing to be outside didn't make it any better. I just couldn't believe that she wasn't seeing anything, and that I literally been gazing at the galactic phenomenon for hours now. These colored lights in the sky were literally, as I said before, dancing. I figured out later that people in bad moods, so to speak, couldn't see them. On the other hand, people in good moods could. It wasn't until months later, just before it turned spring, that I was able to introduce my loving wife to the galactics that danced in the night sky. To top it all off, a few nights later, my wife and I were asleep in bed. I opened my eyes and saw those same bright colored lights outside our second-story bedroom window. I was so mesmerized by the flashing colored lights that my attention was focused on what was going on outside our window. I remember I finally looked down and I saw my body and my wife's body. We were inside what looked like capsules with a giant window on top. The capsules were just long enough for our bodies to fit in. We looked like we both had some kind of clear rubber mask on our faces, and the capsule was filled with warm pink gel. I then noticed that I was actually floating above my body, sitting Indian style. To the right side of my bed was standing a very tall, platinum blonde-haired, blue-eyed man that seemed to be glowing brilliant light. He saw me looking at him, and he leaned over to me and said, "Your heart is about to grow bigger than it ever has before." Then he chuckled and said, "Just like the Grinch." With that, the capsules elevated themselves off the bed and disappeared into the night. The next morning, both my wife and I woke up from a good night's rested sleep. We both had indentation marks exactly where those clear rubber masks had been. The next night, I made it a habit to go out and sing to the galactics. Some nights I would bring a blanket out into the small lawn space that our townhome offered. Some nights I would drag a lawn chair out. Every night, however, I would end my night at whatever time it was and go out and sing to them. One night, my wife and daughter Sky decided to walk up to the nearby park. We took sleeping bags with us and a thermos of hot tea. It must have been around 9:30 p.m. or so. We spread our sleeping bags out and poured up the tea and laid back and watched the light ships. I say ships because now the sky was filled with these dancing lights. When a sheriff vehicle pulled up, the young sheriff walked over to where we were laying down on our sleeping bags gazing at the light show. The nice young man asked, "What's the story, ladies?" We all answered him together, "We are watching the light ships," and invited him to look up as well. He couldn't believe his eyes at what he was seeing. He began asking all kinds of questions about what we thought they were. We explained to him that they were light ships, or what people would call UFOs. We showed him how they responded when we sang to them and how they pulsated just by the sound of his voice even. I went into how we were creators and how our energy vibration of what we were returned to us. He was so amazed by the happenings of those few minutes. He told us how he thought he was going to have to ask us to leave as we couldn't spend the night in the park, but now told us to stay as long as we liked and to be safe. I know that his life changed that night because I saw his soul spark and burn brightly. Since that wonderful night, I have been able to introduce so many others to the light ships in the sky. When I do it, just like that young sheriff, it seems to change their lives by opening them up and seeing for themselves that there is something else out there. Needless to say, since those significant moments in my life, I can honestly say my heart has grown so big that today it feels like it's just bursting out with so much love. Not the feeling of what one may define love is, but the absolute soul recognition of seeing God in everyone and everything. No matter how good or evil that person projects out to be, but really seeing the soul, soul purpose of everyone playing his or her role on this beautiful planet at whatever role it may be. Sharing the light and trying other channels. After my encounter with the Galactics that night, I soon after that started hosting and doing meditation and drum circles. We would invite people to our home. We would drum, laugh, and sing, and end up doing some kind of channeled, guided meditation. Everyone we invited would bring something healthy and yummy to eat, and we would always provide fruit-infused water. I think my favorite was frozen blueberries muddled with fresh mint. I only wanted to expand my awareness even more and more. I learned that there were different substances out there that maybe could help. My dear friends, I gave what they called Molly a try. You see, I think that ecstasy's or Molly's primary purpose, or what it seems to do, is to take all of our stored up serotonin in our body and pull it all together in one big giant bundle so it can literally ignite it, causing it to burst and literally burn full strength for about a 12-hour time frame. During that time, it feels like everything is what I can only describe as a soft, fuzzy pink, warm, peaceful land you are in. In this land, you just seem to completely let go of any and all of your inhibitions and fears. During the life of Molly in my system, I felt like I was just floating. My body's internal system felt like it was being flushed out, and as a result, I became covered with sweat. It is my understanding that today they are using ecstasy to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD, and that they are actually making real progress with patients who are using this medicine. I can say that I used it a few times and truly was able to experience a state of ecstasy that up to that point I had never experienced before. The drawback I had, however, was that it completely used up and in doing so wiped out my stores of serotonin. The result of this was extreme exhaustion, and I even found myself to be angry and moody. I would literally feel like death warmed over when the Molly effect wore off, and all I wanted to do was crash in bed and sleep for the next 24 hours. I can, however, honestly say that I am glad that I had those experiences because, as I said before, I was never able to reach that state of ecstasy before. I guess that somehow my body imprinted or memorized that pattern and can now mimic it without the use of the drug. In doing so, this allows me to actually choose to be and keep my body in that continuous state of high vibration of pure love. Another substance I experienced with was lysergic diamethide, otherwise known as LSD. I only used LSD a couple of times, and I must say that my experience was a psychedelic one. I can see why people may experience bad trips on it. I remember about an hour after I had taken it, I went into the bathroom and looked into the mirror and said, "Show me." I watched as my flesh and bones seemed to just melt away from my reflection. All I saw in front of me in that mirror was what I can only describe as differently colored light ropes in a human form. The colors were brilliant, kind of like, and what I saw in the light ships. We had several profound realizations on our trips. One of which was reality was in our own hands. Another was that life was just indeed a game. I found that many people back then played a game called the game. I think that people pretty much played it worldwide. It kind of went like this. If one person made another person see the words the game, think of the game, or even speak the words the game, the who made the other person do any of the above forced that person or persons to lose the game. I tell you, my friends, that some people played the game so seriously that if another person caused them to lose, violence was the result. Well, during one of our trips, we came to the conclusion that you actually can only win the game by knowing and being aware that you are playing the game. The game that I am speaking of is life. And no, not the Milton Bradley version. The whole object of being in denial that you are indeed playing the game, it actually took our power away from us. We just were giving it away. It kept us in a state of unawareness, being in this denial. It was when we discovered that we were playing the game, and in doing so, we could create and write our own rules to be the master of the game, is when we step back into our own power. The game I am speaking of is the game that many are still trapped in today. It is called the third dimension. The third dimension has duality in it. Such illusion exists in it as good and evil and judgment of one another. People are unaware that the authentic energy that they choose to vibrate at is what is projected outward from them, and it is what returns to them through others. They choose to blame others for what they have actually created and have knee-jerk reactions to most of the events that come along into their lives. I am talking about knee-jerk reactions such as anger, hatred, selfishness, just to name a few. They choose to put themselves into a victim state, and in doing so, literally create a living hell for themselves and actually become a slave to that world. Moving on, I tried DMT once too. Dimethyltryptamine is its scientific name. Every living thing has DMT in its makeup. When we leave our bodies and die, it is the compound within us that literally pushes our soul out of our body, causing our body to separate and our soul to continue on in the afterlife. When we dream at night, we release very tiny quantities of DMT in order for our souls to leave our bodies so that we can dream. This usually happens when we hit REM state, REM. After all, our souls needs to leave our bodies so that we can truly rest and rejuvenate. Remember I mentioned earlier that medicines such as Neurontin, amongst others, keep us from reaching REM state? This is just one of the reasons I have chosen not to use prescription drugs. In my DMT experience, once I inhaled that smoke, my soul was literally blasted out from my body. I had absolutely no reference of any physical reality around me. What once was me sitting on a couch in my living room turned into me floating, and in front of me looked like a huge golden-colored statue with four sides. And it was lying down on its back, yet it was also laying on one of its sides as well. As I floated closer to it, I could distinguish that there were faces on it. I say faces because it had four of them, two, one of each on its four sides. The faces were carved with very strong features into them. They kind of reminded me of the way a totem pole looks. The best way that I could actually describe what I saw in front of me is somewhat portrayed in visionary artist Alex Gray's painting called Interbeings. I was floating in the air, sitting in a lotus position, and I couldn't take my eyes off the statue that was surrounded in a void of blackness. I jumped as the statue started to chant in a low yet melodic voice. Om mani padme la. That is close to what I heard, followed by what sounded like a bass and tenor gong, accompanied with a few chimes. I saw rainbows in the most vivid colors I had ever seen shoot out from the statue, and then the statue would rotate to its next side with its new face. And then the dark black void would return. All the while, the dark void with only the statue, the chanting, the gonging and chimes, and then the beautiful rainbows, the statue rotating, and then the void again. I just sat there watching it all in amazement. I watched as this pattern seemed to go on for what to me felt like years. In witnessing this, a thought came to me that I too was a creator. So I spoke in a loud, commanding voice. I am the creator. At that very moment, everything turned into complete blackness. I looked down at where I thought my hands would be, and I saw what looked like little bright diamonds forming in the open palm of my right hand. These twinkling diamonds grew brighter and brighter. I was again in amazement when I realized that these little lights were stars. I picked them up with my left hand and I placed them into a spot in the blackness. At times, I would just think of a color, and the little diamond became that very color. I very carefully placed each of those little gems into the sky. As I meticulously placed each jewel in the darkness, I realized I was creating my own galaxy. As I said, it seemed like I was gone for what felt like several years as I designed my own galaxy. So I figured it was time that I returned back into the physical world I had left. I took one last look at my creation, and then I closed my eyes. I can only describe it felt like my body was literally sucked out of where I had been like a giant vacuum when I became grounded into my body again. I discovered I was only gone for 20 minutes. When I began my journey, the digital clock said 11:11 p.m. Now, when I looked at the clock, it showed it was now 11:31 p.m. As I started to adjust myself back onto the couch, my stomach seemed to twist into huge knots. I winced from the pain and raced into the bathroom, and all of a sudden, I just began to purge. I tell you, I was so sick, I literally thought it was never going to stop. I was sitting on the commode holding a trash can. It was so bad. I must have purged everything for over 3 hours, and when I finished, I don't think there was even one toxin left in my entire body. Now, when people use ayahuasca, San Pedro, and other similar substances, most report that during or right after they finish their journey, or otherwise known as tripping, a purifying purge of the body will occur. When I look back at that night, I certainly did experience that purification process. It was so intense, I thought I was going to die even. I would like to tell you about one last substance that I used during my time of awakening or opening. The reason why I call these times opening or awakening is because when we awaken our pineal gland, or as it is called third eye, out of its calcified state to be able to float freely, our psychic intuitive powers that lay dormant can come into full fruition, and we can begin to experience our godlike powers. This medicine or substance that I used is Salvia divonium. It is better otherwise known as Sally D. I had tried the substance a couple times before, and this is another one that results in blasting you out of your body. The first time I did it, I felt like I had done something wrong and that the galactic police or some kind of higher authority was after me. You see, when I inhaled the smoke of salvia divorium during those first two experiences, I was in a state of fear. And I must say that fear led me into a very bad trip. I saw the floor roll up in front of my very own eyes. It was as if someone rolled up all of the physical reality into a great big cigarette. Everything, I am talking everything, was rolled up into the roll. My animals, my furniture, and the people I was with, and the walls. I think you get the gist. After everything was rolled up, there was nothingness. And I never felt so incredibly alone in all my life. Needless to say, it took a little while after that scary experience to actually draw up the courage to try it again. Early in the spring of 2012, the opportunity presented itself, and I welcomed its offering. I wanted to make very sure that I stayed in a good space during this trip. So I had my friend by my side, and I had him show me my beautiful sacred geometry cards as I blasted off out of my body. I took 2 large hits of the smoke and laid back on the couch. It was almost like I went off to sleep. When I opened my eyes, I was laying in what felt like a soft velvet box. The box fit my body shape perfectly. When I opened my eyes, I saw that it was black. I looked above me, and it was like there was a soft see-through, almost like saran wrap, covering the top of my box. I reached up and peeled that wrapping off. It even sounded like the sound saran wrap makes when it's peeled off of a bowl. After uncovering myself, I sat up in the box. As I did, I heard melodic, low female voice in what sounded like a British accent chime. "Oh, look, another one has awakened." I looked down at my body and it was flat. It looked like it only had one dimension to it. I can only describe that what I saw was that it looked like I was a paper doll. I turned my head left into the direction in which I thought I heard the voice coming from. As I looked to my left, I saw what looked like very tall figures. They must have been over 20 feet tall and pencil thin. As I tried hard to focus in and really get a good look, something very odd happened. I can still feel what looked and felt like a giant paint roller brush covered and dripping with Pepto-Bismol pink paint come out of nowhere and roll over the top of me, pushing me back down into my little black velvet-lined box. Today, as I recall these significant events in my life to share with you, looking back at that moment as if I were reliving it and I was breathing in that paint and sputtering it from my mouth and wiping it from my face, I really didn't understand back then what pink paint had to do with it. Since then, I have been awakened to the fact that Pepto-Bismol pink is the color of the highest vibration of love, and this crazy experience I was having at that time was just my introduction to it. Well, I have to admit that at that time of almost being drowned with it, I was very annoyed and confused. So I just laid there for a moment, angry, dazed, and confused. I finally got to the point after I got my breath back to sit up and look out again, as I knew there was more for me to see. This time, I sat straight up and looked forward. I heard these words, "Oh, look, another one has awakened." Again, I couldn't believe my eyes as I pushed myself up on my hands to try and get a good view of where I was. I was not the only one in a black velvet-lined box. From what I could tell, there were hundreds of thousands of little black velvet-lined boxes with those soft translucent sticky sheets over the top of them. Not only that, it looked like we were all on the pages of an open book that was lined with those little black velvet boxes. I saw heads popping up as others sat up to examine their surroundings, and I continuously heard the, "Oh, look, another one has awakened" voice, and the Pepto-Bismol pink paint roller pushing them back down into their boxes when they turned their heads to investigate where the voice originated. The open book was humongous, and the pages looked like they were coated in silver leaf. I remember wondering to myself if this was the book of life. After I was satisfied with viewing of what was in front of me, I turned my head to the right. What I saw looked like a giant shoebox with hundreds, if not thousands, of cubicle partitions in them. Each of these tiny cubicles seemed to have a version of me in them. Not only that, they seemed to have versions of my family and friends in those little boxes as well. I was looking at different scenarios playing out in each of those little cubicles. I was with some friends enjoying a meal in one of the cubes. In another, I was cooking dinner. And yet in another, I was sitting with people playing what looked like cards. I can only wonder if this was a glimpse at my other me's in different dimensions, and if each of those little cubicles represented all of the different dimensions. Wow, I could really go through the wormhole or down the rabbit hole with all of the different possibilities. While I was mesmerized looking at all of the different scenarios involving me that I was in, I heard the all too familiar voice chime out again. "Oh, look, another one has awakened." Before I knew it, I turned my head to the left again, at which I was met again by that same paint roller with the Pepto-Bismol pink paint. Between trying to get my breath, I cried out, "What do I do?" I heard the low, melodic voice sing, "Go back to sleep, dear child. You are not welcome here yet." I wonder now if the reason why I was told to go back to sleep or lovingly put back into my box with a loving color was because I tried to wake up through using an outside substance instead of from the change that was going on in my heart. Maybe it was because in order to fully wake up, it needs to happen inside of us and not by using an outside substance. Maybe I just got caught cheating. So I laid back into that velvet box and pulled the soft wrap back over the top of me, and then I closed my eyes. The next thing I knew, I can only describe as waking up. It felt like I had just come through the mirrored wall next to the couch. I grabbed my friend's neck and just held on for dear life because it felt like I was being pulled back through the wall. I did not feel like I was in my physical body. I begged my friend to get me a glass of orange juice. I figured that if maybe I could taste the orange juice, I have something tangible, I could feel like I was in the physical world again. I was really freaking out. It must have been at least 2 hours before I really felt like I was back in the physical world. I'm drinking hint water today. It's apple flavor. The natural grocers didn't have the flow water, so today's a hint day. Hint. People in this world who helped me on my journey. There are a few people in my life that really boosted me into my journey I am on now. One of these wonderful people is my friend, Trina Wallingford. We went to high school together and had lost touch through the years that followed until our paths finally crossed again in 2012. I had learned that my friend did mediumship, so we met at my favorite tea shop called In Tea. I tell you, this amazing soul brought my brother to me, whom I told you earlier left this planet by means of Lou Gehrig's disease. For over 3 hours, she told me things that only my brother and I knew. I cried and cried. I must have been gone through a whole pack of those tea shop napkins. When we finished up, she told me that everyone could do what she did. She pointed to me and everyone sitting at the tables and counters. You can do this. She can do this. And he can do this. She continued, all you have to do is be open. I further inquired how I can do this, and Trina informed me of the different meetup groups of which she started one and was the administrator of, called Quantum Spiritology, the study of spirit. She told me of one such group called Denver Boulder Psychics that later became Insights. I wasted no time when I got home from that encounter. I grabbed my computer and signed up for Meetup and then located the Denver Boulder Psychic group. My daughter Sky was also interested, and a few nights later we found ourselves sitting in this group learning how to open up and utilize these gifts. The leader of the group, who later I developed a wonderful friendship with, split us up into beginners and intermediate readers. She took the beginners and asked each of us to tell her one thing about her, the first thing that came into our heads. My daughter Sky said, "You like cats." She answered, "Yes, I have 9 of them." I said she had pain in her hips and legs. Again she answered, "Yes, I have had trouble for years." Sky and I found out just through that question and answer session that we were more connected than we thought. The next exercise consisted of lining up chairs around the room and facing them outwards. Then people sat in those chairs with their eyes closed. The room where we are in was much like a big conference room with 2 long tables and comfortable office chairs on rollers. The room was surrounded outside by large windows that viewed the office park. The leader of the group intuitively paired us up with partners she knew we would work best with. I never knew walking into her class that night what a beautiful friendship was to come, and now I take great pleasure in calling her my friend. She is highly psychically, medically intuitive amongst many other gifts. She paired me up with another of my now friends, Carrie Stecky, who is also a highly intuitive healing vessel. We took turns sitting in the chair facing outward. Whoever sat in the chair was the reader and told the person standing behind them about themselves or a loved one whose energies appeared to the reader. It was quite interesting because when we connected in with the loved ones that had passed, they showed us or told things that only the person standing behind us knew. As we spoke about the things that unforeseen forces told or showed us just what we sensed, the person behind us would tap us on the shoulder to tell us if the information we were giving them resonated or didn't resonate. I remember one tap was look again, 2 taps meant maybe, but I don't have a clear memory of, and 3 taps was yes. The leader of the group liked to use look again instead of the word no because the word no totally tanks the vibrational energy. Think about it for one moment and just say the word no to yourself. Sit with that for a moment and really see how that feels. Carrie seemed to zone right in on my brother. I guess he was really wanting to get in touch with me. The first time I saw my brother's spirit or ghost was just moments after his soul left his body when it departed from the hospital on Halloween morning. I was staying at my parents' house when my mom received the call from the hospital to say he was gone. I knew it because he had just left from where he was talking with me, sitting on the corner of the sleeper sofa. He wanted me to know that he wasn't upset with me about my life choices, that he would be watching and helping to guide me along my way. Then he disappeared and the phone rang. The next time I saw him was when I was so sick and had my gallbladder taken out. I was under anesthesia, but I still remember our encounter just like it was yesterday. I was in the surgery room of the hospital where he took his last breath in. So I guess that was a fitting place for him to visit me. It was in a beautiful meadow with flowers all around me. There was a small bubbling creek that ran through the middle of it, and next to that creek were two marble stones. Those two marble stones were smooth and looked like they had been carved into a bench. The black, white, and gray marble glistened in the sunlight. I was sitting on half of that bench. My brother walked up to me with the biggest smile on his face. I was so happy to see him walking because he was bound to a wheelchair for the last few years of his life. His blue eyes twinkled as he took a seat next to me. He told me that we didn't have very long because I needed to get back because I had work to do. He told me that I was on the right track. Love is really all you need, and that love is the greatest power of them all. He told me that I would understand more as my life would change for me, to look for those doors that will open for me, and to have the courage to walk through them, to be aware because the time will come and I will know what to do. Before he left, he smiled one more smile and told me, "Oh, by the way, they love the bestest ever," and to keep using those words. Then he was gone, and I woke up in recovery. So I guess my brother thought it was time to let me know that it was time for me to move into what I came to this planet to do. I mean, first coming through Trina, and now Carrie, in a matter of a few days. I guess the time had come. When Carrie walked right into his energy, she began to describe him perfectly to me. I think it was 10 minutes that went by, and every time I tapped her shoulder was consistently 3 times. She even went into him playing his guitar and how much he loved to sing. One song he played constantly when we were kids was House of the Rising Sun. I mean, everything Carrie told me, just as Trina had previously, was spot on. My turn. For me, being a beginner, I think the people that I read for in the information I gave them was pretty accurate. I couldn't believe that I could actually smell the pipe tobacco and cologne of one woman's grandfather. I saw him sitting on a couch across from the stone fireplace. He was having what looked like a conversation with this woman who was his granddaughter. I don't remember all the details that I gave, but it was my first time ever that I gave a reading. When the meetup was over, before Sky and I walked out the door, I gave the leader of the group a huge heart hug. As I said earlier, that was the beginning of an ongoing, truly unconditional loving friendship that I am in great gratitude to be part of. On the drive home, Sky excitedly told me about her experience, and we both found out that we were open to the unseen forces and also highly intuitive. After that night, I couldn't learn enough. It was like I was drinking from a fire hydrant or ate the greatest meal I had ever had, and all I wanted was more. Sky and I signed up for every meetup we could that was listed with quantum spiritology and Denver Boulder psychics. We learned about mediumship, pendulums, tarot cards, remote viewing, channeling, medical intuitive, Reiki, and about all the clairs, psychic powers, clairvoyance, seeing, clairsentience, knowing, clairaudience, hearing, clairalience, smelling, and clairgustance, tasting. I quickly excelled through the classes, and when my dear friend thought I was ready, she literally threw me to the wolves. By saying throw me to the wolves, I mean as nervous and the new beginner as I was, her faith in me was much stronger than my faith was in me. When her students gave psychic readings, they weren't generic or information seeking. When we gave readings, we told the person what we were sensing, hearing, feeling, smelling, seeing, and tasting. We waited until the end and then asked if there were any questions the person had. Usually, we answered everything they wanted to know in those first 20 minutes to 30 minutes. She told me that I was chosen by her guides to help teach, and the next thing I knew, I was teaching lessons that I was channeling in different meetups across Denver. These lessons that I wrote end up being the series I called Alchemy of the Heart. I taught these lessons at different meetups, and I watched as I brought my different perspectives to people and shared my stories. Their lives seemed to change just by applying the tools that I would share with them. I watched eyes that were dull and couldn't see many colors turn to shining bright and seeing all colors of all the spectrums. I was on my journey of being a soul counselor. I was here to assist in helping others heal themselves. In other words, awaken to thy God that they are. And with that, I'm going to stop reading chapter 6. That's the first part. The second part, which I will start reading tomorrow at 2 p.m., is Meet Bill, the ultimate of all evil, or Welcome to the Dark Night of the Ego. I have my little bill, which I'll tell you more about tomorrow, that my wife got for me and painted the name Bill on. It's a very interesting life that we all are going through and experiencing. And the thing is that it's okay to experience life because we all have free will. And we all have this beautiful soul that each and every one of us, when we tune into, we can see what vibration we are truly putting out or bringing in. I find that the vibration that I put out is what comes back to me. And I would encourage you to just become a little more aware of those vibrations that you are emitting out. It's called our authentic frequency. And when we are aware of our authentic frequency, it's kind of funny because those things out there no longer really influence how we feel. You know, the news stories, I was very sad when I watched a video of a newscaster. I think she was on MSNBC, and she was talking, and I'll be more than happy to post the video. I can find it again. It's funny how videos kind of disappear, but the video was this beautiful newscaster, and she said on the newscast that it was scary of someone else telling us what to think. It was scary of someone else telling us what to think because it was their job to tell us what to think. And when I started watching some of these news broadcasts this way, I noticed that, like, after, the president speak or whatever, they have these commentators, these different commentators that came on, and these commentators, in my perspective, would view their opinion of what was just said, even if it wasn't just said, it was what they interpreted what was being said. And we have all these different commentaries on the Bible. We have all these different stories of one person's view of how things went. And then we take those views as being gospel instead of really just throwing out all the different commentary and just looking at the words of Jesus in red. And I'll tell you, those words alone are very, very powerful. We would find ourselves, and I'm not knocking churches because, people go to churches, they get their spiritual fill, they get their, they get their vibration tuned, so to speak. But we go to church and we listen to a sermon of an interpretation of what the scripture said. But I'm here to tell you that you are an intelligent, beautiful being of light. You have the power to figure out things on your own. I am not here to tell you what to think or what you should or shouldn't do. Because we all have that beautiful vibration inside of us, that frequency. I talked about when I was in high school and I was that student assistant for a beautiful teacher. And the other teacher that I had, and I told you about the time when I lied. I flat out looked at somebody in the eye and was capable of really lying. And that person trusting me so much that they believed my lie. And it was all over. I'll tell you the story again for those of you that missed it. I was I was a student assistant, student aide, but I also took this class, and I believe it was mythology, I believe was the class. And we had a substitute one day. Our teacher was ill and she was out, so we had a substitute. And we were supposed to take a pop quiz. You remember those pop quizzes? And half of the class period went by and our substitute couldn't find the pop quiz that we were supposed to get the class period to take this quiz. And it was a long pop quiz, if I remember right. There was a lot of questions on it. And the substitute finally found it about halfway through the period, maybe a little less than halfway through the period was left. And she handed it out and she said, I am very, very sorry that I couldn't find this quiz. And I know that it's going to affect a lot of your grades. So I am going to go ahead and let you guys take this quiz open book, open note. And we thought that was okay, but we had to promise her that we would never tell anyone because she could lose her job as a substitute. Put that out there. So I was sitting in the office one day and I was grading some papers, and this teacher walked in and she looked at me and she said, "Debbie, did your class use your notes on that quiz? Because I've heard through other students that other classes that your class did. Did your class?" And I looked at her and I said, "No, no, we didn't use those notes." And I find that a lot of times when we lie, it's to protect ourselves or others. Some lie in trying to make them look bigger or gain followers or whatever it is. But most of us seem to lie to protect. And again, it's a state of fear. It's a state of ego. Either way, it's a state of ego. And I felt really awful the rest of the day because she was like, okay. And I really felt awful the rest of the day. So I met with one of my other teachers who was a kind of a mentor to me. She was the theater teacher. And I walked up to her and I said, I lied to our teacher. And she looked at me and she said, "You lied?" And I said, "Yeah." And she says, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" And I said, "I need to go tell the truth." So I tracked the teacher down and she was in the office, and I walked up to her and I said, "I have to tell you something. I lied to you. Yes, we used our notes, but it was only because the sub couldn't find the quizzes and we didn't have a whole class period to take it, and she thought it would be a fair play to let us use our notes." And she looked at me and she looked down and she looked at me again and she says, "Oh, Debbie, I thought I could trust you. And you know, when someone says that and your heart just sinks down into the pit of your stomach. And then she looked at me and she says, and now I know I can trust you even more. And it's very true. The truth will set you free. The truth. And I said that to say this. In this very interesting time that we are in, there are a lot of truths that are coming out. There are a lot of people that have suffered at the hands of others that are finding the courage to come out and say, hey, this happened. And we may get angry. We may want revenge. We may want justice for that. But as I do in my other videos, I just ask you, when you start to learn these truths, as ugly, as horrific as these truths are, I ask that you do one thing. I ask that you stop before you start going into whatever the energy is. And I ask that you hit your knees and pray. And pray. Pray for the healing of not only the victim, but also the victimizer. Send love, not emotional love, unconditional love to that being, the abuser, and to the abused. That's part of what the Great Awakening is all about. Is to see that we are all children of the Most High, our Creator, God, Awun Vashmea Nidkadeshmach, who is our beloved, who is everywhere, known by many names, even Allah. That we are all a part of God. Whether we have chosen to live backwards and be evil, or whether we have chosen to live forwards. I don't know, maybe the evil is the service to self. And by service to self, I mean that really hurts others to get ahead. And we, as these beautiful beings of light, of children of God, have a power like none other. The first power is love, and the second power that we have is forgiveness. And maybe while we are praying for these people that have done things that are worse than our nightmares, we too can be just like Awun Vashmea Nidkadeshmach and love, and go into our hearts and see that we weren't perfect, that we've lied, that we've cheated, that we've stolen, that we've hurt others. I was listening to David Rodriguez on Laura Eisenhower's YouTube channel. David Rodriguez is he was a really good boxer. And he said that his girlfriend told him when he said he was being a dick, basically. And his girlfriend told him that hurt people hurt people. Hurt people hurt people. But we have a choice. We can see that those that hurt people, whether or not they have just the tiniest firefly light of soul left in them, or have sold their soul. David Rodriguez says he doesn't see it as selling a soul. He says he sees it as renting out a soul, because we are all children of God, and God is love. And it takes a lot of hurt as I said in chapter 4, chapter 3. It takes a lot of hurt to close a heart, but it also takes a lot of hurt to also open a heart. And if we tank the energy by saying, no, we do not consent, but then we raise the vibration of the energy by saying, but I love you, and I do forgive you. So that's what I have for you all today. I hope you enjoyed chapter 6, and I will continue with chapter 6 tomorrow. I will be, again, premiering this, uploading it, and premiering it on YouTube at 5 p.m. I am really liking the YouTube presentation. While I'm recording on Facebook, I'm recording on YouTube too, and I'm really liking that presentation.